Welcome to the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast, where it is never too early for fantasy football. My name is Jeff.
Now I'm Alex.
Hey, Alex, how's it going today?
It's going well today. We get to talk about fantasy football, and it is less than 6 weeks away. We actually have our first week of football this week with the Hall of Fame game. Jeff, are you excited?
I am. I'll probably actually watch some of it, even though they will be the second, third, fourth stringers. But 5 weeks from Thursday is the NFL kickoff. As always, thank you for downloading, listening, liking, and commenting on our podcast videos. Please subscribe to us on the socials. We are on Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, the artist formerly known as Twitter, now known as X, and Threads with the handle at N2EFantasy. Alex, do you have a rundown for today's show?
Okay, so we are catching up on the news for the last week. So we have a Washington Commanders potentially changing their name. I know we might have discussed that a little bit before. We have some Alvin Kamara news, which is something that we desperately need to keep an eye on. Cole Kmet has potentially re-signed with a huge deal with the Bears. They made the commitment to him. So we also have the Jets, Aaron Rodgers, taking a massive pay cut, and we can take a dive into maybe some of the motivations for that. We also have a recently signed running back that has already retired from the NFL. We have several wide receiver injuries as well. We have a suspension for an infamous running back that we can talk about. We have Giants wide receiver movements. We have Joe Burrow news, multiple Joe Burrow news for you guys out here. We also have the Colts in turmoil with Jonathan Taylor as well as that whole running back group. So that will be fun to talk about. So, Jeff, let's get started with a team that seems like they're weekly in our videos, the Washington Commanders. They are considering a name change. Do you think they make it happen? And when does it come into effect? And what will it be?
It should happen after the 2023 season. And this is actually coming from Magic Johnson, who is a minority owner of the team. And it is going to be really interesting because there is a petition out there for them to return to the old name, but then there's other names out there like the Red Hogs, the War Hogs. There's a whole bunch of different names that are out there that could fit the Washington team name. Basically, the ones that will sound the best are the ones that probably have two words in them. So I just think that like red something, war something, red war, something like that. What do you think about that, Alex?
I like the idea of them going back to their old name. However, I think they should replace the logo with like a hog or a boar or something like that. So it's not derogatory towards the person and it is more towards the pigs. And they were called the hogs because they had giant offensive linemen back in their heyday. So they have that. So it's play on both. I think it would keep more people happy, but I can see them going to something like war hogs. I think would be probably a close second at this point. Hopefully they don't stick with a really bad or too cheesy of a name, but they can always fall back on the Washington football team.
I think they want to get it right this time, though, to be honest. And I think this ownership group will be able to do that.
I agree. Well, let's talk about one of your favorite running backs in this league. The Saints' Alvin Kamara is going to be meeting with Roger Goodell to discuss his legal incident and give him his side of the story.
This could really go either way, and it's really going to boil down to Elvin Kamara's recollection of events and what the video shows if it lines up with his recollection of events. I don't think that this is going to result in the normal 6 game ban for domestic violence because this is not domestic violence. This is two guys slugging it out in a casino, which the NFL knew about, and they let him play in the Pro Bowl right after that. So I do believe that the NFL does not care about this as much as they would if, say, Kamara hit a female or a child. I think the I think that the standard here is going to be set, and it'll probably be set at a game or two max if I had to guess. What do you think about that? Am I too light on him or am I just right?
No, I think you're right. I think to me, I'm estimating 2 weeks. So that sounds about right to me. It didn't seem outrageous. Obviously, it didn't involve a man beating a woman or a kid. It was grown men. So I don't think it'll be as severe as other issues in the past. So I would say 2 weeks. His number one issue is going to be, will Jamal Williams or will their new rookie eat into his carries and his touches in that time frame? So he's got to watch out for those guys, and he has to play very well when he comes back.
Right. And the good thing about that, I think Kendra Miller already hit the injured list earlier this offseason. So he's probably got a leg up on Williams as we enter the season. So I do think with the improved quarterback play and the fact that Derek Carr likes to dump off to running backs like Josh Jacobs in the past, you're going to probably see that with Kamara, but Kamara is a different type of running back that can receive. He's actually excels at it. The closest comp to Kamara is probably Christian McCaffrey. So I do expect a lot more screens and runs, and I expect them to be a lot more efficient of offense with Derek Carr versus Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton last year.
Yeah, I'm hoping that Kamara can bounce back. I was a little disappointed with him last year personally, but we'll see what results of this meeting, and we will see how Alvin Kamara handles this season. So let's talk about a tight end that you're a little bit higher than me on, but the Bears, out of the blue, offered Cole Kmet a 4-year, $50 million extension. They really committed to him, so I appreciate all the puns that I can throw out there, as many as I can. But what do you make of this deal? Do you think it's a good move for Chicago? Do you think that they overpaid him? What do you think about this?
So I think at the end of the day, this is a good move for Chicago. They have a quarterback on a rookie deal, and he's essentially going to be their number two or number three receiving option on the team. The only thing that I think of when I look at this, so basically out of the 4 years, the first 3 years are guaranteed, which gets them pretty much through Justin Fields' rookie contract. But what I kind of look at with this 4 year, $50 million contract is I realize there's players like Barkley and Josh Jacobs that can't get this deal that I consider more valuable to their team than Cole Kmet is to the Bears. What do you think about the contract? Does that make it seem a little bit better that it's a 3 year, $32.8 million contract, and then we'll see about the rest?
I don't think that he's earned this amount of money, in my opinion. I think it's an overpay, but I think it's where Chicago has a bunch of cap right now, and they have to spend a certain amount to meet minimum spending requirements. And he is someone who he knows the offense. He already has a little bit of a rapport with Justin Fields, so might as well keep him locked down, I guess, is their standpoint. I think it was too much. I don't think he's a top of the line tight end. I think I'd rather spend that money elsewhere. Like they could have brought in Hopkins, who I think would have been a better receiving option and given him some of this kind of money. But I it's their team. They can spend the money how they want to, and hopefully he earns that money this year. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I fully expect him to live up to it and be a TE1 this year. And I also expect this to be a front loaded contract. As you were saying, they do have a lot of cap to spend. If it's a front loaded contract, like it's whatever at this point
Yeah.
because it won't matter in years 2, 3, and 4. We will see what happens with Komet, but I do think that they're planning on him being a big part of this offense going forward. I think him and DJ Moore are the top two receiving options. Maybe Mooney and Claypool get thrown in there a little bit, and the running back, but I do expect them to be the top two receiving options for the young Fields. who did say that he would throw for 4,000 yards this year. And considering that he's barely thrown for 4,000 yards combined in his first 2 years, I think that's a little bit ambitious, but I do like the fact that he's taking an ambitious approach to this.
Yeah, if he throws for 4,000 yards, he will already be better than Lamar Jackson, who has been in the league a lot longer, because Lamar Jackson has never done it. So that would be interesting. I like the Bears offense a little bit this year. I definitely like Justin Fields going into this season, but he's got some things to his game that he has to prove that he's improved upon. And I hope that DJ Moore is the catalyst that can turn Justin Fields into a better passer. But speaking of all this money and speaking of quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers just set a pile of cash on fire by agreeing to a $35 million pay cut over the next 2 seasons. Is Aaron Rodgers, is he just the nicest guy that can be and he's just giving his money away to charity, or what's happening here? Why did Aaron Rodgers take this pay cut, Jeff?
So Aaron took this pay cut, and I'm going to take him at face value on this because I actually do believe what he said. He says if a guy becomes available at the trade deadline, he didn't want his contract to become a barrier to getting better and getting improved talent at the trade deadline. I do think that this is also a big stick it to Green Bay moment because while he did move cap around for Green Bay, he never actually took like a pay cut. But I also believe that Rodgers never felt that Green Bay had his back and would actually spend the money wisely. And I do think that he has a say with the Jets on who they spend it on, who they go get. So I don't think that he has like an executive role, but I do believe they have a wink wink nod nod, like you come here, you get to make some of the personnel decisions and moves, and we're going to take your opinion very seriously.
So I think it's partly that, but if I'm gonna put my conspiracy hat on for a second, I'm not the only one that thinks this. There are other people on the X verse, because I used to say Twitterverse, but it's X. It's X now. X. Anyway, there's people in the X verse that have also floated this out that potentially the Jets have offered him an ownership stake if he gives up some money over the next 2 seasons and plays for them these 2 seasons. So there might be another under the table deal that makes up the compensation for Aaron Rodgers, but they can't announce it because that would be an illegal move for the team.
It is, and we're never going to be able to prove that that's what happened, but he gave up 35 million and they do estimate like 1% of ownership is worth roughly 60 million. So it could mean that they have a wink wink nod nod like you give this up now and we'll hook you up later, but again, I don't know if we got to it, if they'd be able to explain it to the NFL and how that would go down if if that was the case.
Yeah, I mean they could just offer it to him half price in 2 years, which would make up the difference between this 35 million and the estimated 60 something million that 1% is. So I'm sure they've got some stuff cooking in the background, but it's all speculation with no evidence. It's just something fun to comment on.
Yeah, and I think that at the end of the day, Rogers is a guy that I would want in my front office because I do think he has an eye for talent, and I do think that he doesn't. He's not a yes man, so he will give his unfiltered opinion, and he won't be skewed by the room.
So Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb are the eye for talent, like they're the talented ones that are gonna send the Jets forward.
So there were other items that happened, like Jake Kumaro getting released one preseason, and that was Rogers' like go-to wide receiver, and Kumaro did well in Buffalo. He was just trapped behind the depth chart, and he's a preseason warrior, to be honest. But I tend to trust my quarterbacks with who they have chemistry with, and I do think that Rogers does rub teammates the wrong way, and I do believe that Cobb and Lazard have his back, and I do believe that's why he's bringing Lazard and Cobb with him is because he does need someone to have his back. He also needs to have someone that knows the Aaron Rodgers system because let's be honest, this offense is not going to be the Jet system. it's going to be the Aaron Rodgers system, and that's kind of why they brought in Nathaniel Hackett as well. So I think the reason why they brought Cobb and Lazard in was to get chemistry a lot quicker with Rodgers and his wide receivers. I'm not saying that they're the best two wide receivers because I do think Garrett Wilson ends up being the best receiver there, but they might be able to help get the other receivers up to speed a lot quicker than Rodgers would be able to on his own.
Do you want to talk about Nathaniel Hackett? Because I agree, it's going to be the Aaron Rodgers offense. I don't think Nathaniel Hackett is an offensive guru. I think he basically is the figurehead at coordinator for Aaron Rodgers. Like he's the stand-in, but it's really Aaron Rodgers' way, Aaron Rodgers' system. That's why Nathaniel couldn't hack it at Denver, and why Sean Payton blasted him in public, stating he's done the worst coaching job of anyone he's ever seen, and then later had to backtrack because I think he upset a lot of coaches out there because no coach wants to get blasted like that. So I think he had to do a retraction. But Aaron came out with a "get my coach's name out your mouth" uh, response, which I thought was hilarious. The whole thing is funny. I can't wait to watch Hard Knocks now. This has been one of the things. This has probably been the best advertisement for Hard Knocks that I've ever seen, and it's nothing to do with the producers of Hard Knocks.
Right, and Denver plays the Jets in the first half of the season, if I'm not mistaken. Also, so there
Very
is some
nice.
bulletin board material there. And on top of that, I do believe that so Rodgers' last two MVP years, so the 2 years prior to this year, were under Nathaniel Hackett. And I do think that he regressed this year without him. So you can say what you want about Hackett, but maybe Hackett's a sounding board for Rodgers or someone that
Yeah.
reins Rodgers in and can keep Rodgers together when he's a little bit miserable. But I do think that there are coaches out there that are really good coordinators and can't be head coaches, and that just might be
Yeah.
Nathaniel Hackett's ceiling.
Could be, could be. They could have like a special relationship for sure. I think Hackett might just only be effective only for Aaron Rodgers, for all I know. But you're right. His best years were under Hackett, and maybe people should be looking for an MVP season from Aaron Rodgers this year, and maybe putting some bets down on Aaron Rodgers winning the MVP instead of Justin Fields, who is the number one bet for MVP this year.
So the last like 4 or 5 quarterbacks to change teams, they've been very successful. Like Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Brett Favre. They've all been really successful when they've changed teams and they were like all pros, even former MVPs, all of them. The only one that wasn't a success was Russell Wilson, and we kind of give Russ a little bit of a free pass, kind of blame it on Nathaniel Hackett. They were a mess. Coaching wise, they couldn't even get plays in. They couldn't run the clock. He had to hire someone to run the clock for him. So I mean, I'm willing to give Russ like the first half of this year to see what Russ really is. So we might be 4 for 4 in the last 4 quarterbacks being like a success for their new teams that got traded for a huge package. And Rodgers could be the fifth. Like there's actually like a track record of players, star quarterbacks going to a new team and kind of lifting them up. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking about the Broncos because of Sean Payton and Russ, so we can jump to a couple Broncos points here, and that is sad news with Tim Patrick tearing his Achilles. He is someone who has consistently hit about 750 yards, I think 2 or 3 years in a row. Jeff, I know you slated him for a breakout year this year of his age 29 season, and Broncos also waived KJ Hamler, who, with a non-football illness designation, he has a heart issue, which I wish him the best for. Both of these guys have had hype the last 2 or 3 seasons that they're going to break out. Tim Patrick has put some solid work in. Hamler never really lived up to his draft potential. Jeff, what do you make of these two guys and now the Broncos wide receiving corral?
So I'm really sad about Tim Patrick because I do believe that he would have ended up with the best chemistry with Russ. And well, we're never going to know that now because I don't think he gets another shot to come back from this, especially after an ACL and then now an Achilles tear. He did have a couple 700-yard seasons with not very good quarterback play. He had like Drew Lock and maybe Brock. I don't even know who he had as a quarterback before Drew Lock. But that does. So this will probably be the last time we ever bring up Tim Patrick. we bid Tim Patrick's career a farewell and what could have been. And he was actually like a preseason warrior, and he was actually outplaying the other wide receivers right now. So I do think he would have gotten some serious play time if he would have made it to the regular season. But moving on to KJ Hamler, he's the first person that I've heard of being waived with a non football illness. I've heard of the non-football injury list, but I had to do some digging to see if he was really waived off the team or what this really meant. And it does seem like he's going to be a free agent after this. He's 24 years old. He's got to get this heart condition under control. He does say in his post that he will get this heart condition under control. It's not goodbye, it's see you later. So hopefully we will see him back. But the Broncos receiving core really thinned out in the last 24 hours, and they were kind of a crowded room. We'll see what that means. If that means if Mims moves up the depth chart, if Marquez Callaway, who is a Sean Payton favorite, moves up the depth charts. We'll see if Sutton and Judy can develop better chemistry with Russ. I know you're a big Sutton fan, but he did not look good with Russ last year, and he was a guy that I did draft in leagues and was very disappointed in. And then they have a plethora of tight ends too. They have Dulcich, they have Troutman, and they have Albert O. So they have still a lot of pass catchers, but this cleared some room for who's going to be the pass catchers.
I think that they went from one of the deepest wide receiving groups to they're a lot more shallow now, and I think that Sutton is the possession guy. I think Jerry Judy's the more athletic guy who's going to be the field stretcher now. I
Could be
think,
Mims.
yeah, Mims as well. I think that it's going to be interesting how they use these wide receivers, and maybe now they'll use two tight end sets, and maybe use Albert O, who I think has been underutilized so far. So it would be interesting to see how this changes their plans and who breaks out. I think that the popular viewpoint is that Judy is the number one receiver right now. I just don't think he's a very good route runner, and I think that there's proof of that. I know that Matt Harmon, who does reception perception, has charted out his routes, and he's not a very good route runner. I think Sutton is a better one. Sutton's not as good of an athlete, so it's going to be interesting. I know Sean Payton can scheme things up to make an offense look better, and I think it's going to take Russell Wilson also turning the corner as well. It's interesting to note, though, you said that you didn't think Sutton was that great this year, which I agree, but he still had a better statistical year than he did the season before. So I think that's interesting. Hopefully, he can get higher up than that. But overall, in redrafts, I'm probably avoiding a lot of Broncos unless I get a really good steal of a value. What about you, Jeff? You targeting any of these guys now?
Nope. Tim Patrick was a guy that I was looking in maybe in the last round of drafts, just from a chemistry standpoint and a good under the radar sleeper. And I just think that just went away overnight.
Yep, I agree with that. Okay. Now, last week, Jeff had mentioned that sometimes some of these veteran players they sign with the team and then they're like, I just don't have it in me. I'm going to retire. And we have the first case of this, a prominent name anyway. The Rams' new running back, Sony Michel, who just signed with them, has retired from the league. He got there and said, I just can't do it. Or he got there and he said, man, this team stinks. I'm retiring. I don't know. Could be both. But Jeff, you going to take your victory lap here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think players sometimes sign up for a team and they realize that they don't have it in them to go through a camp again. I think Jalen Hurd did it this offseason. He's not that prominent because he really hasn't been that great in the league. And then John Ross has done it too. And I mutter John Ross's name because he was a dynasty favorite and he never lived up to his billing of what he was supposed to be. But Sony Michel is the most prominent name, as you mentioned, and we bid his career a farewell as well. So him and Tim Patrick were bidding their careers a farewell on this show.
It's a sad time for Tim Patrick. Sony Michel got a little bit more run, I feel like. I don't know.
Pun
But
intended there.
yeah, pun intended. Another guy whose career could be over, another popular name in fantasy circles. Raiders released OJ Howard, who has never been able to start for a full season. He's never gotten the amount of attention and receptions as everyone hoped. He's always been very talented, never materialized in any form or fashion, and now a team that needs as much help as they can get has already given up on him. Jeff, what do you make of this?
So I have a couple of different points on this. I think OJ Howard's career is over. I don't think he's been the same since the Achilles tear. So I do want to wish his career a farewell as well. So now we're up to 3 players that we're ending their careers for them. And maybe we'll get into a habit of doing that, and maybe that'll go over well, and maybe it won't at times. I do think this gives a bump up for Austin Hooper, who was going to share time with Howard with the rookie Mayer. And I just believe that in 2 tight end sets now that Hooper will be out there all the time, and that'll just help him increase his production and potentially be at least a bye week fill in for fantasy.
I don't disagree with you there. I think Hooper probably would be the tight end to own this year, and I think Mayer is the dynasty tight end to own, is my guess. But outside of that, we have a potential another player who may have reached the end of his career as well, but in a different way. We have the Cowboys backup running back, Ronald Jones, the prince who was promised, is suspended for 2 games for PED usage. And I don't know how many more chances this guy can get that he can blow. He should have ran away with the job at Tampa. He should have gotten the job at Kansas City and was beat out by a 7th round rookie. And now he's at the Cowboys. He's probably was viewed the primary backup, at least for rushing, to Pollard, who can't stay healthy, and he's already blown it. So I don't know if the Cowboys are going to want to keep Ronald Jones. I haven't heard anything positive in training camp about him anyway. I know that Deuce Vaughn has looked good in the passing excuse me, in the passing game, and he looks very speedy, although he looks very tiny. Um, I think they're probably going to bring in another back, and I think Ronald Jones might be shown the door. He might end up on someone's roster somewhere, but probably as a third or fourth back. I don't see him getting another good chance like this again. So I just he says it was part of a heart medication. Maybe that's true. Hopefully, he has an exemption if that's the case. But he's not doing his career any favors, and I've been out on him since he lost the Kansas City role. So Jeff, do you have any thoughts and feelings on Rojo?
Yes, I do. I'm not ready to bid his career a farewell like we've done in the previous couple of items, but I will say that I do believe that Jones, one, his roster spot is safe because he doesn't cost a roster spot. So there's that. And if we're looking at any silver lining out of this, and then 2 weeks is a long time. 2 weeks is a time where Pollard could get hurt. Deuce Vaughn couldn't look up to speed, and Rojo looks like the savior coming in there. So there is a path where he could get relevancy again. Yeah, like I just wouldn't bet on it. Like I'm not grabbing him, I'm not stashing him. I'm just gonna hope for the best for him, and I'll pick him up off waiver wires if something happens to Pollard. But other than that, I'm gonna leave him alone until I kind of figure out what's going on there.
Now, there's still like a very small, thin chance he makes something of his career. It just looks increasingly smaller and smaller the more I hear about him. But there's also a new Rojo in my life, and that's Roshan Johnson with the Bears. So I'm waiting for him to take the throne of Rojo. Uh, but we can move on to the Giants. They have just reactivated Sterling Shepard and Jamison Crowder, and also Seahawks activated Noah Fant. Do you think that for the Giants, and I guess for the Seahawks as well, they have a plethora of receiving options now? Do you think that they hold on to all of these guys throughout the preseason, or do you think they move on from any of these guys at a certain point?
So we'll start with Noah Fant real quick because that's going to be the easiest one. Noah here, he finished tight end 18 last year. He was very quietly the lead dog in a 3 tight end room, and I expect that to continue this year. That was his first year with the Seahawks, and I do really expect that to continue. He's currently in my top 20 tight ends this year, so he'll be rostered, probably not started a lot. He's a guy that could outperform his ADP really easily. Every quarterback, especially the not elite ones, love their safety blankets, and he's exactly that. Now, as far as the Giants, the really surprising part about the Giants move is they have 15, give or take a little bit, wide receivers on their roster. I thought that both Wandell Robinson and Sterling Shepard would start out on the pup, miss the first 4 games, so they wouldn't take roster spots. And then the Giants could kind of see what they have with the rest of their wide receivers. But they activated Sterling Shepard so far. They activated Jamison Crowder, who may or may not make the roster. But the Shepard one kind of surprises me the most because it does seem like they're very connected. But to be honest, Sterling Shepard may not make this roster still.
Yeah, which is weird because he was a very highly drafted wide receiver when they took him, and he just hasn't stayed healthy his entire career there. He might be one of the poster boys for being injury prone. I don't know what they're doing wide receiver wise other than they're taking the shotgun approach where they're just going to stash as many wide receivers on the team as they can and see what shakes out. It looks to me like some of these guys are competing for one spot or maybe 2 spots. And Sterling Shepard, Jamison Crowder, Wandale, some of the other guys out there too, I think, are all competing for like 2 spots, maybe. And I think Hyatt is the best deep threat, the best field stretcher. I think he has no competition, in my opinion. Waller as a tight end is probably going to be the top receiving option. So it's really going to be interesting to me what happens with this group.
No, I completely agree with that assessment. I think Waller and Hyatt are the only 2 things that are set for this offense, and the rest is just kind of up in the air. Considering their history in Buffalo, I'm surprised they haven't brought in Jake Kumaro yet. And I think that Dable is just trying to create competition for the wide receiver room, and he wants them to be sharp by the season because he realized how lacking his team was in the wide receiver room last year. And now he's going to see if he can't find a diamond in the rough. And with a lot of retreads like Paris Campbell, even Slayton's still there, Shepard. I think Wandell Robinson, I think his roster spot is safe for whenever he does come off of the list, the PUP list, and we'll see where they go from here. But I think that the Giants' wide receiver room is worth monitoring. I just don't know if there's anyone in that room that I would take high. Waller would be the first guy that I would take outside of Barkley, but to the rest of them, maybe a late round flyer on Hyatt, but that's about it.
Yeah, I think dynasty wise, Hyatt for sure seems like an interesting guy to keep an eye on. And redrafts is Waller. Outside of that, I think Darius Slayton so far has been their best wide receiver to this point. So I think he probably sticks around. I would be shocked if he doesn't. Man, it's gonna be weird if they don't have Sterling Shepard anymore, but I think I
Right?
would part ways with him. I think I would part ways with him at this point. I
They
think that they're
also have Isaiah Hodgins that was really good last year, and he was probably their top weapon last year, but I don't consider him like a top weapon in the NFL.
I mean, Slayton was the top weapon technically last year outside of Barkley. Your guy that you just mentioned, Hodgkins, I can't even say his name right now, was number 2, and I think he will probably stick around as well. So, to me, that leaves Sterling, Shepard, Crowder.
Paris
I
Campbell
think what
probably sticks too. He had 63 grabs last year, which is more than anyone else on the roster right now.
Yeah, that's really weird. I think
it
though
gets it gets
that
touchy.
yeah, I think that like I said, a lot of these guys are competing for 2 jobs, and I think we've already mentioned some that are probably going to stay. But we'll see. We'll see how
But
it
that's
all.
why I
Oh,
thought they were going to keep Shepard on the pup list is to conserve those roster spots.
I think he's still trying to earn that job. I think they want him to earn that job because last few seasons he's been a non-factor for them.
Yeah, he re-signed a 1 year deal with them too, but there will be a lot more to come with that towards the end of August. I don't think we're going to get a shakeout of that anytime soon.
All right. Well, we can move on to our last 2 major items, but our juicy items here. We have the Bengals starting quarterback had an injury scare that rocked the fantasy and NFL community a couple days ago. Joe Burrow pulled up on a non-contact injury and freaked everyone out thinking he blew out his Achilles, but it looks like it's just a calf. They've confirmed it's probably just a calf. He's going to miss probably all of the preseason, probably not be 100% for week 1, but still play. So that was startling for anyone who had Burrow, Chase, Higgins, basically any Bengal on that team that wanted to have any kind of fantasy relevancy. I know we were probably in several group chats that were freaking out over the news until it finally came out it was just a calf. Jeff, did you did you make sure you wore a diaper whenever that happened, or I'm just wondering, did you wet yourself a little bit when that happened? I know you own Chase, a lot of Chase, I think.
Uh, yeah, whew, I didn't like this at all. And this is the second. We should be very clear about this. This is the second preseason that he's going to miss. He missed last year with appendicitis and getting his appendix removed. So this is his second missed preseason, and we can't act like that's not a big deal. It is a big deal for timing and chemistry and all that good stuff. But I do think he'll be ready for the regular season. I do think he'll be out there week 1. But what is happening with Burrow in the preseason?
I think it's just hot. He doesn't want to be out there. He's like, oh, I hurt my calf, guys. Either that or they're not giving him enough Gatorade. It could be one or the other. But it's certainly not fun to see one of the best quarterbacks get hurt and then miss an entire preseason. We want him to build that chemistry with his players. We want players to have their best chance to showcase their skills and make the roster and can secure their spots. We want to see all that stuff happen, and now we won't. It's going to be the 2s and 3s that play with all the weapons out there. So it's not fun as a fan. It's not fun for someone who owns one of these players on their teams.
Completely agree. What is fun though is Joe Burrow is strongly rumored for quarterbacks season 2, so we might get a look into his life outside of football. What are your thoughts about that?
Joe Burrow is one of my favorite quarterbacks, if not my favorite quarterback in the NFL. I've really liked him since his LSU days, and he won the title, and he had Justin Jefferson, and he had Chase. So he's had some good wide receivers, both in college and the NFL. He's won in college. I think he's very close to winning in the NFL. I think he's got the most calm and chilled and confident persona. To me, there's some elements that I think remind me a little bit of Tom Brady. Granted, he doesn't have any rings and Tom Brady has several. So he's got a long way to go in that regard. I'm just excited to watch his NFL journey. Jeff, how do you feel about Burrow being included? And one of your quarterbacks is rumored to be interested as well. So why don't you break those down for me?
Yeah, I think that I feel the same way about Justin Herbert, who may have let slip today that he's going to be part of season 2. I think I feel the same way about Justin Herbert that you feel about Joe Burrow, and I'm really excited to see their outside of their life outside of their NFL career. And I do think that this could actually be a better season than season 1, and I will be watching quarterbacks.
I hope they're both in it. I hope that they have more top-heavy quarterbacks than they did this last season. But either way, I will be excited to. I like the first season, so I can't wait for the second season.
Agreed. So
Sure.
before we close everything out here, so we have a couple more injury news. First, the Colts backup running back Zach Moss broke his arm in practice, but he might be back by the opener, but it'll be close. He's got about a 6-week recovery, and he broke it exactly 6 weeks from the opener. So, what are your thoughts on Zach Moss here?
I think you're burying the lead here a little bit. The Zach Moss news broke out after all the Jonathan Taylor and Jim Irsay banter. So Taylor, whether it was himself or whether it was his agent, floated the idea that he would pretend that he had a back injury or said that he had a back injury and he wasn't going to play until he was healthy. And Irsay floated out that basically they would put him on the NFI and not pay him at all. And this is following Jim Irsay opening his mouth about the running back issue, and that basically toughen up Buttercup because nothing's going to change. It is what it is. Everyone will forget us when we die. Like, it doesn't matter what you think you deserve. Like, everyone, it doesn't matter to anybody else. Like, the hardest stance ever. And it's rumored that he told Jonathan Taylor directly that it's inappropriate to negotiate a new contract. I'm not going to give you a new contract. Play out your deal, which Jonathan Taylor knows. It's this last year, and then it's the franchise tag. He's not getting a deal. He can't be happy with that. So all this broke out. Jim Irsay threatened him with the NFI, so he wouldn't get paid at all this year. He wouldn't accrue a year. He would go back to this same contract next year if he tried to hold out or hold in. And then after that happened, then Zach Moss broke his arm. The news came out that he broke his arm, and so it's like, what are they going to do at this point? This whole thing is wild. Like, I don't know what to make of this. I don't like airing dirty laundry like this. I know that Taylor refuted that he had a back injury and that he would hold in. So who I don't know who is right, what's real. I don't know what to make of this, Jeff. So I need you to to soothe my mind and break this down and what you think's actually going on here and what's going to happen.
So we can break down the order of events. First, Irsay tweeted about the running back issue with their contracts. But this brings up like something that I've always been told. Before you speak, ask yourself if what you're going to say is true, which yes, the running back market is depressed. Is it kind? So it wasn't really that kind. And is it necessary? And it wasn't necessary to tweet either. So I think Irsay coming out and doing that kind of was stirring the pot, and it didn't really need to be stirred anymore. So let's start with that. And then I do believe from that, Jonathan Taylor and Irsay talked, which resulted in Jonathan Taylor requesting a trade, which Irsay said, we will not trade you under any circumstances. And then Taylor was like, oh, my back, which is alleged right now because he's actually refuting that. And then the Colts said, oh, you're back. That happened before you got here. We're going to put you on the NFI instead of the PUP list, which if they left him on the NFI for the entire year, he forfeits his salary for the entire year and his contract rolls over to 2024. So he would get his 2023 salary in 2024. And every subsequent year would go a year later. So this is really interesting, and we're kind of at a stalemate right now between the Colts and Taylor. I do think this gets resolved before the season starts, but I do think Irsay stirring the pot in the beginning created some really bad juju that broke Zach Moss's arm. And we talked earlier about Sean Payton speaking up about Nathaniel Hackett, and just this week he lost Tim Patrick and KJ Hamler. So let's not act like juju is not a thing in the NFL. If you speak evil into the air, evil will find you, and that's what happened to Sean Payton and Jim Irsay this week. I do think this does get resolved as we get closer to the regular season, and I think the resolution is Jonathan Taylor just plays out his current contract. I don't think he gets traded. I don't think he gets a new deal. I think it's just he plays out his current deal, and he probably ends up getting the franchise tag next year. So I think this is going to be a lot to do about nothing, but it is something right now until it gets resolved.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I think, like you said, the only thing he can do at this point is play out his contract and see what happens, whether he gets tagged or whether he gets an extension after it's up. That's the only thing he can do now.
They
They've
are
kind of
getting real
checkmated him.
offers.
I've heard that there's 5 teams that are interested in Taylor, but they haven't released who the actual teams are. Ian Rappaport said he's talked to general managers himself, and they are willing to give him a big contract, which I'm a little surprised of. But we will see if anything changes. But Irsay's been adamant that he will never, ever, ever, ever trade Jonathan Taylor this year. So we'll we'll see how that shakes out.
I mean, I think that at the end of I wonder how the GM and the coach feels about Irsay's dictating these moves. Because let's be honest, I feel like Irsay is the one dictating these moves. I don't think it's coming from Chris Ballard. I don't think it's coming from Steichen. Also, imagine how much having a Jonathan Taylor back there will help Anthony Richardson's development. Like, the weight of the world will not be on Anthony Richardson. If Jonathan Taylor is not back there with him, then the weight of the world is on Anthony Richardson, and he has a lot less likelihood to succeed because there's so much pressure on him and there's not a lot to throw to in the Indianapolis offense right now. I don't think they have an alpha. I think they have a bunch of number 2 and number 3 wide receivers. I don't think they have a great tight end. They won't have a great running back. I just think this is a recipe for disaster for Anthony Richardson if Jonathan Taylor does not play.
Well, to add on to that, their offensive line's not very good either. They still haven't done much to address their offensive line. You know how I feel about having a good offensive line, how it could influence a team. So this roster doesn't look very good. They're not doing a good job at supporting their fourth overall pick starting quarterback. And I don't think that it bodes well to recruit free agents to the team as well when your owner is basically bad mouthing one of his star players. So I don't think it's a good situation, and I don't think there's much that we as fans can do. And I think that Jonathan Taylor has at least one more season with the Colts this season. I don't know what happens after that. Probably franchise tag. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it all shakes out.
Agreed. So we do have one last item that just came in. Breaking news. Cooper Kupp left practice early today and did not return. And when head coach Sean McVay was asked about the injury, he did not have any updates regarding his status or what happened. Now, that seems really ominous because if he was just fine, Sean McVay would say that he's fine and it would dispel this rumor. So I'm going to be on the lookout and in the watch on Cooper Kupp news here over the next 24 to 48 hours.
Man, I don't. Do you think it's an injury or do you think it's a frustration thing?
I think it's an injury. I think the team is going to be actually decent this year.
Come on, man. That team is not what it was when it won a Super Bowl. It has fallen pretty far, in my opinion. And
You mean
Cooper
19
Kupp,
months ago?
yeah, that's all it takes, man. It's a short-lived league. Short-lived, unless you're Tom Brady. Then you can win all the time.
But you got Aaron Rodgers returning to his prominence of 17 months ago.
I think Aaron Rodgers is in a better situation than he was last year with Green Bay. I think the Rams are going to go the way that Stafford is feeling, and I think Stafford is turning into one of these aged quarterbacks now, like a Matt Ryan or Carson Wentz, Philip Rivers, Ben Roethlisberger. Once you hit that 38-year-old wall and you get close to that, get close to 40, like your body falls apart, and he was already falling apart before this point. I think Matt Stafford isn't long for the league anymore. So,
Did you just say 38? He's 35, my friend, and he's got a lot of years left in this league if as long as his shoulder holds up.
his body may be 35, but his arm is 47. So I don't think he's long for this league.
So last year the Rams were at least in games with Mayfield and without Stafford and without Kupp. With Kupp and Stafford back, the team is going to be exponentially improved from last year.
The Texans were in games with Davis Mills. That doesn't mean they're leaps and bounds better this year with CJ Stroud.
We got him leaps and bounds better. We don't got him a top 2 or 3 pick.
I don't think the Rams are a playoff team, no matter how you look at it.
I don't think they're a playoff team, but I do think they'll beat the Seahawks in the standings this year. And I know that is a pain point for you.
It's never going to happen, Jeff. That does it for another episode of the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you all for downloading or listening to this episode. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, leave us a comment, and please share the show. Every little bit helps.
As always, you can find us with our handle at N2EFantasy on Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, the artist formerly known as Twitter, now X, and Threads. Please give us a follow. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and remember, it's truly never too early for fantasy football. Thank you again.
Bye, everybody.